Good morning. Once again. Hans? I'll turn you over to Carl.
Great, thanks very much. Well, welcome. It's quite a healthy crowd for a Friday at the World Bank, so that's very good to see. And there's good reason for the big crowd. We have a couple of very special guests today, Hans Rosling and Beth Noveck. And their presentation and discussion today will focus on the changing world, a new mindset for a multipolar world. Dr. Rosling and Ms. Noveck are two very influential thinkers on the power of open data, information visualization, and innovations in governance and development. They will present their ideas on how the bank's new open data policy is helping transform the world. As you know, President Zellick launched the initiative and data.worldbank.org in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic just 1 month ago, providing full and free access to over 2,000 key indicators from the World Development Indicators, the African Development Indicators, Global Development Finance, and Doing Business reports. There's been a huge response. We've had more than 1.6 million page views on the site, 80,000 downloads of the files, and 20,000 external websites are now linking to data.worldbank.org. And we see this really as just the beginning of a bigger move here in terms of opening up our public goods, open knowledge, and opening up development. Hans Rosling, as you know, is Professor of International Health at Karolinska Institutet in Sweden, known, of course, for his TED Talks and visualization software. Mr. Rosling's presentations are grounded in solid statistics from the World Bank and from UN data, and they use powerful animation to transform development data into the now very famous moving bubbles that we're all so familiar with. And that global trends he's showing are now clearer and more intuitive, and in some cases quite exciting and quite playful. They've changed the way we look at data. Mr. Rosling developed this breakthrough software behind these visualizations through the Gapminder Foundation he founded with his family. The free software, which can be downloaded and can use virtually any data, has recently been purchased by Google in March of '07. Mr. Hans Rosling feels that very strongly that subnational data is a very important part of this dynamic to get at some of the key and core understandings of development and, of course, the importance of building capacity. Beth Noveck, we're very pleased to have with us, of course, is the Deputy Chief of the United States Technology Office for Open Government and is now leading President Obama's Open Government Initiative, which is a pioneer in this area as well, as you know. She's based at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. She's an expert on technology and institutional innovation. And her groundbreaking book, Wiki Government, challenges current paradigms in governance and is the basis of much of the Obama administration's innovation in open government. Ms. Noveck will talk about the impact of open data on economic development and the recent experience of the United States with data.gov. So we'll turn to Ms. Noveck first to speak. We'll take perhaps a couple of questions, and then we'll turn to Hans Rosling for his presentation. So I'd like to join all of you in welcoming our distinguished guests today.
That's okay. Great. Thank you very much. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I have to say that I am very happy to go first because my visualizations cannot compare. So you're going to have, we're saving the best for last. My slides are really quite awful by comparison, but I hope you'll endure and bear the visuals, and that I'll be able at least to share some information and news about what's going on now in the Obama administration in connection with this exciting agenda of open data, open government, and collaborative democracy. So as some of you may know, and if you've looked at the book Wiki Government, you know that my own experience in this derives from, in particular, a project that I've had the pleasure to work on for the last couple of years called the Pier to Patent project. And Pier to Patent was very simply this: the idea that the patent office itself, the United States Patent Office, is an institution that, while it is supposed to be an institution about innovation, needs some innovation within the institution itself. Namely, you have beleaguered and overworked examiners that have only a few hours to make the decision about which inventions become the next path-breaking invention and get a monopoly grant of 20 years of monopoly rights over the invention that they develop. But the people forced to make those decisions sitting in an office in Alexandria have very limited time to do that, and very limited access, in fact, to the information and knowledge that they need in order to make such an important decision. There are significant consequences to this dilemma. It's not just that we are issuing patents that may not be worth the paper that they're written on, but those patents are then being challenged in court and so facing huge fees for litigating those patents, which is then money diverted from R&D and instead put into the legal system and paying for the students that I otherwise train when I'm not serving in government. It's paradigmatic of a problem that I refer to as the single point of failure that's common to all institutions, whether governmental or otherwise, but is particularly problematical in our legal and political culture, which places such an emphasis, again, on uniformity of procedure, on consistency of the ways of doing things, on being inure from populist pressures, and therefore centralizing the decision-making in an institution like the Patent Office. And that is that we are trying to make decisions often on the basis of limited information with limited time. In a world of increasingly complex challenges, this is not working out very well. We know that the faith and trust in our government institutions is at an all-time low. And I should make out very clearly that whereas Gallup didn't test it, that the executive branch is no less immune from the lack of faith and the lack of trust that people feel in their institutions, as is Congress. The President said it himself in his State of the Union when he talked about the fact that we are frustrated by the fact that every day in Washington is Election Day. We are fighting bitter partisan battles and therefore not potentially doing our jobs as well as we may or ought to or need to. And this is giving rise to a sense, again, that institutions of governance and government are not working as well as they ought. Yet, curiously, and some of you may have seen this data from last week, those under 30 trust government more. This problem is an older generation. Those under 30 are actually trusting government more. And the question is, why is that if this data is to be believed? Well, I think this has something to do with the hope and the faith and the possibilities that are created by working in a networked digital world when we connect networks of knowledge to government institutions, to those static procedures, blow open those procedures, if you will, to get at information in new ways in order to solve problems better. So what did we do in the patent context? The Peer-to-Patent project was taking a very old idea of collaboration, an idea that came from, if you will, from Thomas Jefferson, who when he headed the patent office back in 1791, actually turned to academics, in this case of the University of Pennsylvania, to say, help me examine this patent application and determine if this invention for alchemy, is actually truly novel and new as the law requires. And so was born the idea of peer-to-patent. Connect a social network, connect an expert network, not a Facebook and not a Twitter, but an expert network that we would create to connect professionals with expertise to patent examiners in order to supply the information that would be needed to figure out whether an invention is truly new and non-obvious under the law. So let me mention right at the outset that this process was not about a, shall we say, true crowdsourcing. It was not about asking the masses, do we think this invention deserves a patent or not? Or how do you feel about this invention? It was about tapping the expertise and the enthusiasm of a wide range of people out there across the world, and by world, I mean world, not just in the United States, and to ask them, do they have the specific factual knowledge needed to determine if an invention is new? Marrying that distributed expertise, looking for that needle in the informational haystack, if you will, with the legal, procedural know-how and knowledge, the dispassionate decision-making, and the knowledge, again, of the procedures of the government official to create a system that would hopefully be both more information-based, more empirical, as well as faster and cheaper to run. So taking this idea, now jumping forward a few years now, we see a proliferation of this concept of getting networks of people together to share their enthusiasm and expertise, whether it's in the peer-to-patent case to identify knowledge and information that people have, or to develop new things that people might create, like in the case of crisis camps or the crisis commons movement, is again creating then software that can be used to text your location when you're trapped under a building in the event of a natural disaster such as the crisis in Haiti or in Chile or elsewhere. This is very simply the notion that we can get lots of people together sharing their diverse expertise to in fact, solve these very difficult problems in new ways. So if we take the stock market fluctuations of last week, what if we thought about getting 1,000 brains involved in identifying what actually happened when the Dow dipped and rose and fell so fast last week? What if we thought about crowdsourcing not just the wild masses, but the expertise of people to figure out how to fix this oil spill problem, or how to deal with the mine safety crisis that we faced just a few weeks ago? Again, the idea is now, how do we take the collaborative ability of crowds of people and try to embed that way of working, a networked way of working, to address the problems that we face, whether it's problems of global and international development or whether it's problems on the domestic front. We need to move towards a more collaborative way of working that I like to think of as taking the changes we see in civil society, change.org, these common things like crisis commons and crisis camps that are now common knowledge across the social sphere and across civil society, and bring them into the way that traditional institutions actually work. So I sometimes mention this example. It's kind of silly in a way, but I think it illustrates well the problem is when DARPA turns around and says, we're going to celebrate the internet, the birth of the internet, by releasing 9 weather balloons and inviting people such as Sandy Pentland's group at the MIT Media Lab to use social networks to figure out where are those 10 weather balloons. A very difficult logistical problem. They solve it in 9 hours using a set of useful incentives and common social networks like Facebook to figure out where the balloons are. This is nothing short, I think, than a process of institutional reinvention, of trying to rethink how we do business, of how we work, while from the inside. So re-engineer the plane as we're flying it, if you will, by trying to create systems of focused collaboration whereby we, again, not simply throw open the floodgates of important decisions to push-button plebiscitary democracy, and at the same time not trying to have a command and control approach whereby we within an office in Washington come up with all the answers, but how we take these new collaborative approaches to solve problems more effectively. Let me take a few minutes to tell you how we're beginning to do this within the Obama administration, how we're trying to approach this problem. And I'm going to skip some of the slides in the interest of time and trying to get to more Q&A, so you'll forgive me the vertigo effect you might get. But we started this effort very consciously by having the President's first executive action be this memorandum on transparency and open government, by setting out these principles that we would try to create a government that is more transparent about its data and the way that it works, but also a government that's more participatory and collaborative. So not just getting out more data, but thinking about how we get people to work with that data and information to solve problems in new ways. This has led to a policy process that's been unfolding over the last year and a half, most recently on April 7th, when now close to 40 major government agencies and departments, all the cabinet departments, have created an open government plan, their own strategic plan by which the agencies have said, this is how we will become more collaborative, how we will bring innovation to the way that we work. The first of these principles, of course, is transparency, and every agency has been mandated, and I really want to celebrate and compliment the World Bank on its phenomenal effort at creating this open data initiative here. I think it has been an inspiration to people in the U.S. federal government who are thinking about and trying to work on the same kinds of problems that you have been really at the forefront of this movement and helping to show everybody that it is possible to put out data. So data.gov, of course, which today you may or may not know is the anniversary, 1 year today, that we launched data.gov, starting with 47 data sets. The notion of rough consensus running code. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Start with 47 data sets. And now we have over 250,000 in a year. And lest you think, who cares about data except for Hans and a few other statistics geeks? Well, 97 million people have looked at data.gov, and in a recent Pew survey, 40% of the people surveyed said that they had downloaded data from data.gov and were using raw government data, and using it, whether it's to make tools like these that you'll find on data.gov, visualizations like these. I hope we have lots of your work that's up there, or soon will do. And that's then really spurring, if you will, a sort of spin-off effect where people at the state and local level are also beginning to release their data catalogs so that we can, in the first place, hold government more accountable, put out more data to be sure that we're making decisions and we're spending money and we're spending the taxpayer dollars in the most effective way possible. That's the first reason. It's when we put out this data, some of you may have seen the piece in the New York Times this Sunday, we allow people then to go beyond just measuring how government spends data to actually come up with and figure out what is the state of the USA, if you will. What is the state of healthcare? What is the state of education? What is the state of developments in this country and around the world, where the World Bank data is really, I think, enormously important to this effort of really having an understanding of the problems that we face so that we can fix them. But we were very explicit when we created this data transparency strategy of not only focusing on data that was about transparency and how we spend money, but it was also about aligning transparencies to strategic goals. In other words, putting out data that helps people to solve problems by combining transparency of data and information with a strategy for participation and collaboration. So when you connect transparency to participation, when the Energy Department creates a platform like OpenEI and puts out energy data on a wiki that says we're not going to just push out our data to you, but we're going to invite you, the public, to give us data back so that we truly have a robust picture of energy usage and energy independence, we can actually collaborate in new ways to get a better picture of the state of affairs, the state of energy usage in this country. When we combine transparency and participation, we can actually find the problems and the gaps, as we'll hear a lot more about, so I won't belabor this point. We can also get people to be more informed when they participate in policymaking, so that when we put up blogs and we put up wikis and we put up brainstorming sites and we ask people to give us advice about how to make policy, as the agencies now and the White House are doing, we can actually be sure that people are doing that participation informed by data, informed by numbers. And in fact, every open government plan that was developed by the agencies has required to be subject to citizen participation both before the plan was drafted and then after the plan has been drafted. And finally, when we take this idea of transparency and engagement, so data-driven engagement in the way that government works, and we put these things together, we have the third principle of our open government strategy, and that is the idea of collaboration in the way that we solve problems. So again, it's not simply getting information into the way that government works, but pushing out problems and challenges so that we can get people to work with us in new ways. It's policy innovations like the apps for healthy kids, where we said we have a problem, which is how to reduce the rates of childhood obesity in the United States. We can do that by putting out the MyPyramid data set from USDA, now the fourth most used data set on data.gov that provides nutritional data, and we marry that to a competition backed by a prize to develop video games for kids about healthy eating. And we come up with an approach for addressing a problem that's not legislation, that's not regulation, that's not the traditional ways that government works, but may be more effective and more impactful in the way that we actually solve things. We come up with, and we have in fact this new guidance on the use of prizes, let me go back to this, that was deliberately part of the Open Government Directive to ensure that we could enact these kinds of policy innovations. We have things like open grant making taking place across the executive branch. In other words, not simply giving out money to solve a problem, but creating a platform that connects people to one another so that they can share and trade expertise and apply for grants together, and thereby improve the quality of their applications and improve then the services that they're able to render with the money that they the people that they serve. It's collaboration now across levels of government. When you make data open, you can have a program like Virtual USA run out of the Department of Homeland Security that now connects 21 states in an initiative to share first responder data, fire, water, safety, in order to get people, in this case, across the borders of Louisiana and Alabama, sharing data in response to the BP oil spill. It's the ability to collaborate within government institutions. So it's the ability of, in this case, the Veterans Administration to take a platform, a $2,000 tool called Kindling, and to use it to connect 19,000 employees of the Veterans Administration to solve the problem of how do we reduce the backlog of veterans benefits claims. Within 1 week, those 19,000 employees, 7,000 people signed up, supplying 3,000 ideas that were in turn winnowed to 10 ideas that have now been implemented at the VA to address the problem. It's the Department of Defense connecting scientists and technologists across the whole DoD using an expert network. This one is called Aristotle, to help people find one another, because the person, it turns out, sitting at the next desk may have as much expertise or information about how to solve the problem that you're working on that you would never otherwise know or talk to unless you had a way to find one another. But it's also the ability, and I'll close with this, to not only connect across levels of government, but to engage in public-private collaboration, like a peer-to-patent project. So when the Federal Register says, the Federal Register, which publishes every day, effectively the daily journal of the executive branch of government, when they say we're going to make this data set, the Federal Register itself, downloadable in a raw format, so that instead of $17,000 for a subscription, you can have it for free. Groups like GovPulse turn around and create a more readable, better, more searchable, usable version of the Federal Register, and now in turn the government institution is able to take this innovation and bring it back into government, and we'll see these developments coming shortly, to turn this into something that looks more like this. It's the ability to connect people to one another, not only two institutions in the center. But when the President celebrates and champions an initiative like National Lab Day that now involves organizations representing 2 million people who are volunteering to go into America's schools and to do hands-on science and technology learning, we, the White House, we are not running it, we're not paying for it, but what we are able to do is to use our voice, our convening power, our bully pulpit, if you will, to put out the challenge of saying we care about STEM education in this country, we care about science education in this country, and therefore we need the private sector to step up and help develop a solution. National Lab Day is one example, again, by connecting people to one another. And I had the great pleasure last week to be at a school in New York City with a scientist and a group of 10th graders where we learned how to filter wastewater. And in fact, at the end of our experiment, we all got to drink the wastewater, which is project-based learning at its best. So let me just say that what we're doing fundamentally here and trying to do by being more transparent and being more open with our data is at its root not simply about data for its own sake, but about enabling collective action, about enabling people to take action together in new ways, whether it's to engage in citizen science projects like a National Lab Day, or whether it's getting people to do streets cleanups or other kinds of hands-on work in their communities, whether it's getting people to engage in a policy exercise. We're fundamentally, I think, about restoring trust in, coming back to our initial premise, restoring trust in and engagement with the institutions of democracy and of democratic government, and in so doing, I hope, empowering people within their own communities, within their own lives, to make change happen for themselves and to make a difference. So with that, let me stop. Thank you. And now on to I'm just the warm-up act. Now on to the show.
Okay, let's then move to Hans Rosling's presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions for both of our guests after the presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really great to be here today. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk about how at Gapminder Foundation, we have used data to upgrade mindsets for a multipolar world. And the other aspect is the importance of accessing data for innovating new things. I come from the medical profession, and we were sort of very concerned with H1N1, wasn't we? It was a severe disease, we thought, but it turned out swine flu wasn't that bad. I've also been very concerned about DBHD. DBHD has been a more chronic disorder, you know, and it's database hugging disorder. And I congratulate deeply, and from a lot of people out there, the World Bank for having cleared itself completely from this disorder. It's interesting that the turn you have done is quite a big turn. It's quite a big change. In fact, when Daimler-Benz made the first car, it took them almost 10 years to realize that they could put the driver behind the windscreen when the horse and the hinds were gone. You know, we get a new technology, and we don't use it fully for a very long period. In fact, what are PowerPoints when you show slides? It's just the way we show the Kodak slides. We continue to do it the same way. That's why I carried my laptop from there to there, because I have live animals in this laptop. And I've developed the skill to use 2 fingers. It's very rare. When we had the Kodak slide projector, we just had next, isn't it? And now you do return. It's 1 finger. I have a course in Stockholm for advanced communication with computers, where I teach professors to use 2 fingers. You put one on the Alt tab, you put the other one on the tab here, and you can go around between different open windows. This is groundbreaking change in how you communicate. And no one does it. No one does it. Because you come and PowerPoint, it's quite good PowerPoint you have, but it was stuffed animals. And if you want to make your living like a snake charmer, you shouldn't have a stuffed snake. You should have a live snake, you know. And how do we innovate this? This is what we have been able to do. We've been able to use this, and now I have to find my way back to this. It is window. There we are. Wait, I had one where we were. There we are, and I walk around them. This is where people get nervous. This is why they don't do this, you know. That's no problem. I get credits for having done... I should turn on my wireless mic. That's a good idea. I have got credit for developing the software and the moving bubbles. This is wrong. This is just an old tradition of giving credit to 70-year-old Caucasian tall males. And it was my young son and his wife and a group of programmers in Sweden who did this development. Child labor. Very, very, very useful means of production. And my son very long ago did this slide set, which is interesting today. He said that data is available over there. There's a lot of valuable data available. But it's underground in data sets and databases. And the public is up there, and we have the internet. And how can we make green plants grow there, which are nourished from these rich data sets, so that we can understand the world? Well, it didn't happen as long as they were expensive. You had to buy them, and they were difficult with passwords, and they were boring outputs. The bandwidth, the optical bandwidth for numbers are very narrow. We have a very limited ability to absorb numbers through our eyes and get them into the eyes. The optical bandwidths for animations and graphics is enormous. It's absolute. That's why sport is so fascinating to look at. You can look at ball games. We can see films. We have such an enormous face recognition ability. How many faces do you know, and how many cell phone numbers do you know? This really shows the difference, you know. And if we can convert that value which lies in the hard work of collecting, compiling, and storing and keeping available in a safe and correct way data to that broad bandwidth which exists in the eye. We can do a lot of things. So what's needed? We need design tools, but PowerPoint is there, Freehand is there, Flash is there, Illustrator is there. They are already made. They already existed. The only thing is access to data set. How can we have the people, these two professional skills? Almost all successful development in the world is division of labor, isn't it? Division of labor. The people who have the skill of making this happen, making numerical representation of what happens in the world, are often very different from the skills of the people who make this happen, who make animations happen and makes it understandable. And we all have to have a lot of respect for meteorologists. They have really made it. They are in parallel to the statistical professions and us epidemiologists and economists. You know. They gather huge amount of data in numbers. They process it in very advanced way. They produce it graphic, and in prime time, evening news, they are there presenting the hailstorms coming in and the weathers, and you all sit watching at them like that. That's what we are up to compete with, you know. We want our economic indicators, we want our social indicator, our environmental indicator to be communicated in primetime TV with the same efficiency, you know. And they have achieved it by reducing the transaction costs in different parts of it. But on the basis of all is the skillful and professional and with integrity collection of meteorological data and processing it. And there's one thing that worries me with this free access to data when I face it, is that there is a lot of software engineers out there who say, oh, we can write algorithms, you know, just give us those raw data points, and with these algorithms we'll make fascinating things. You can fire the statisticians and save a lot of money. That is one of the major dangers with this open access data. This won't happen. Rather, this is the time to invest in statistics. This is the time to cherish the experience we have in statistics. And I would really like to honor the World Bank Development Indicators, World Development Indicator Group, for having done such a visionary work many years ago in compiling data in unified format across the sectors. This is the valuable thing with WDI. That it was across sectors, so we could compare schooling outcomes with financial indicators, with environmental indicators, with health indicators in that data set. And it really shows what otherwise we get. In WHO, we don't even get a health data set, to be honest. There are 23 different data sets inside WHO, because they are funded by different donors, and everyone tried to provide something which that donor like. They may be more or less freely accessible, but they are not uniform. So it's very important to realize that it's not just to free the data and you will cut the costs and you can do without statisticians. It's the other way around. This is the time for investments in statistics because it can be used so much better out in society. So what will happen here with this? Well, you can make it happen in many different ways, the data. But what we would like to achieve, and what was the end of this one, is actually this. We want a lot of different databases to be collected to some major databases. Perhaps this is the World Bank, this is United Nations Statistic Division, you know. Some, not just one. It's good to have 2 or 3 who compete. It always works better. And I think the advantage with the way you have been handling data here in the World Bank compared to United Nations Statistic Division is that you are closer to the user. You are closer here to data being used for decision making, whereas you United Nations Statistic Division are closer to the producer of data. And that's why I think it's a very healthy dualism between what the World Bank can be doing with data in the future and what United Nations Statistic Division can be doing with the data. It's not that many think, oh yeah, we can do without one of them. Which one should we fund? No. It's very important to have this user input for statistics. And I've heard about your vision here about not only open data, but open knowledge and open solutions also. That is what you are capable in this institution is also to process that data analytically into understanding why countries and institutions do well or don't do well, and then giving concrete advice. This is really, really fascinating what you can do. And you see, there's a lot of place for innovations here. We have to have a way of getting data out. When do you see animations in TV? There are 2 occasions you see it. And these great TV companies in the United States who produce such a lot of amazing things. Presidential elections. They get wild. They have a lot of boy toys, in the studio, and it doesn't make you understand the election anything more, But they get wild with animations and interactive maps. And then when there is a new war, you get the battlefield with animations. But the whole other social development, we have not managed to get that into TV. And I can see a lot of software investments which could link to the free data which you have here, and that is a commercial investment which is needed. And I think that's what I really like with the policy you have now. It's not that old, yes, we'll share our data for non-commercial purposes. We like the market economy, don't we? Huh? And me as a Swede, I also like governments. Huh? And I've come to that the good society is the one who finds the optimal balance between the market and the government and the civil society. And that changed over time, how you should balance this out. And there is such a lot of place for innovation. That's what I really like with your new policy, that you will get investors. Even we, Gapminder Foundation, we regard ourselves as a museum on the internet. We don't run an advocacy agenda for anything. We are not analytical. We are just sort of descriptive of the world. And we would like to be like a museum. And museums are often good to be non-profit, but we are strategically non-profit, not ideologically non-profit. And when we distribute our videos and our graphics, we put in the beginning for non-commercial purposes. And then we say, why do we put it non-commercial? We took that away. Creative Commons buy. That's the only thing. Because if someone in Africa finds a way of putting down data from World Bank, videos from Gapminder Foundation, material from other sources, from the National Statistical Agency, on a CD which they sell to master students in the country, that's fine. Let them make a business of that. And if they charge too much, some other ones would get the other free data and burn it on the CD and compete with them. So it's very important that we allow this intervention to happen. We have these smart boards. We have a company in Sweden called Cleverboard who's trying to, it's not so much fantasy to start Cleverboard when there's a smart board, but anyhow, they try to compete. And they have the idea that they're going to sell this interactive smart board for schools with a lot of software inside it. Like that, the Nintendo, you get some games already when you buy it. And this idea, you may find World Development Indicator packed with a certain software inside that one when they sell it to the schools already. And then they have an upgrade. And that we should allow, because then we will help the market sector to develop new teaching tools. So public access to data is what I think will help this process. How many can see that this is beautiful? It's Nocturne in B minor from Chopin. Is there anyone here who can see the beauty? Yes? There's one. There's always one who can see it, yeah? This is fascinating, isn't it, And I had the problem with I used to read State of the World Children from UNICEF every year. It came in December, It was so fascinating. Because I can read numbers and it becomes bubbles in my head, it becomes life statistics. And I was reading it in bed late at night, and my wife came up with this decision, that she accepted that I read in bed. And she accepted that I was reading statistics in bed. But she didn't accept that I made those noises. When I saw the child mortality in Malaysia falling every year, amazing progress I saw in Asia, and it was so fascinating. I remember from last year, And there's one here who can see that this is beautiful. But most of us, we would honor the composer. Chopin was a great composer. And musical notes is an absolutely clever, unified format in which you can communicate music. It's a breakthrough in music. But you need someone to make instruments, and Steinway make good instrument, and then you need someone to play it, a musician. And the great news now is that Yamaha is making a new technology, so you can buy this for your kids. You don't have to waste all the money on this costly things here. So here we have the great statistical division here at the World Bank. You are composers. I honor you. We also honor you. And then we have now nice investments by Google and by Microsoft and by small companies and big companies, and they make new technologies. And I'm the musician down here. I take the data from here, I take the instrument from there, and then I play it. And I'm very proud to be named the Mike Jagger of statistics, you know. You can But it's very important that we have this division of labor clear. In Gapminder Foundation, we found out that when we in our animated statistic make data available, we use the verb display data. We don't upload data. We don't claim ownership on the data. In fact, in the interface, you just, on the axis, you click and you get back to the one who did the hard and skillful professional work of compiling it. So how can I use this? How can I use this to present it? I take the presentation I gave yesterday at Microsoft CEO Summit with the leaders of the biggest American companies. I actually had the honor as a public health professor to speak just before Warren Buffett. And that's a little special for Swedish public health professors. My task was to say that this division of the world between developing and the West, that's gone. But it's still our mindset. And my students say that this is a long life in small family which characterize the West, and developing countries is a short life in large families. And this is the G7 mindset, isn't it? Huh? When something really got serious, it was not United Nations. You have to call the G7 together, you know. And they made the hard decision, and they took up the billions that were needed, and they solved the world problems. You know? Now, the most successful display we have had with our bubbles is, in fact, there we are, and then we go there. Huh? It's to display the countries like bubbles and sizes, population, and then number of children per woman on this axis. And then length of life here. Exactly the concept my students had when they said that the West have small families, 2 to 3 children, and they live 60 to 70 years. Yes, indeed. That was one cluster, and there was one cluster down here. But that was 1950. And I have repeatedly found that the worldview that our students have correspond to the reality the year their teachers were born. And I advise everyone who wants to be professor to choose global health. It's so easy. It's so easy. Don't go for English literature, you know, economics or anything. You have to read a lot of books, you know. Global health, you just take World Development Indicator data set and you make some bubbles and you become famous, you know. It's very, because the ignorance is so deep. So what we do, no one knows that this is what has happened. And you see my classical presentation here when I run this forwards, because this was 1950. And you can see now the bandwidth you have for graphics. The Great Leap Forwards by Mao Zedong, it was not a success. Here, but the family planning in China was a great success. You can see how this is coming over here. And you can see the Latin American countries coming. You can see the green there, Arab countries moving to smaller families. You see India, Bangladesh is catching up with India. The HIV epidemic is taking down African countries. And we have a completely new world up there. This is the innovation we had when we realized that when we liberated the x-axis from time, the x-axis had been occupied by time for 200 years since the innovation of the scattergram. And when we took that away, suddenly we could display one indicator down there, the size of family, or to be more brutal, it's the bedroom, isn't it? It's whether there is like Afghanistan here, it's all higher patriarchal, male-dominated sexuality, and you get as many kids you get without talking. Or you have nice pillow talks over there, and you have the young couple say, we shall have 2 children with shoes going to school, and once we shall have a holiday. And you can then see how the whole world is full of modern countries here. And my breakthrough with this was when I showed this, and Vice President Al Gore came up to me and said, I didn't know that. I didn't have the slightest idea about this transformation. And that was Al Gore, who loves statistics. Then you can imagine the rest of them. It's actually very different. Look here. I picked 3 countries which we saw in the news who came to Tehran to make that surprising deal. Just in the face of European Union, North America, suddenly Lula and Turkey, a NATO member, and Iran said, we'll make a deal about nuclear energy. And we regard them as developing countries, isn't it? Developing countries who had 6 to 7 children per woman in 1950 and had a life expectancy of 40 to 50 years. And they come up and try to run the world just in the face, in front of the United States here. Let's take away the rest and see what has happened. What has happened over this last 50 years. Look. They are all up here. The family size of Turkey, of Iran, and of Brazil is the same as the United States today. The bedrooms have uniformed themselves. The young couples have the same pillow talk in Turkey, Brazil, Iran, and United States. They are modern young couples. And in the bedroom, the religious leaders and the political leaders very rarely really enters into the bedroom. I claim that the world is run from bedrooms. That's where the most important things happen and the major decisions are made. And the interesting is also that the life expectancy is quite high in these countries, whereas if I change this one to economy, income per person, I see that, they've not catched up. They are 50 years behind. Turkey is even more, 60 years behind. So they've catched up at the human side with health and fertility, but not at the economic side. And here actually I can take away this, and here you have Tom Friedman's flat world. Now I have income per person here, $400, $4,000, $40,000, logarithmic scale. And here you have life expectancy. Down there, Congo, Afghanistan. The good thing is that you can learn exact position of 193 countries when it is on graphics. I think I know almost all the bubbles here. But it's impossible to learn. Even Shada and Eric, you don't know by heart exactly all the numbers of the main indicators. But if you have to make it into graphics, you can do it. And the interesting thing, you can also get a more realistic view here of how the world has shaped. So we go back to 1800. Here we had to do some addition. There's a major strange thing in the United Nations and the Bretton Woods institutions. The world started 1948. And I feel quite honored because I was born that year. You know? So I also sort of messed up in my head and took it for granted that this is what happened. But growing up, I realized that there was a world before also. So what have we done? We have honored the late Agnes Madison, the great professor in economic history who really compiled the long data sets. And then we have even complemented them. So that was a work we did at the museum at Gapminder Foundation. And we have then made very rude estimations on this, but we have meticulously documented how we do it. And it's nice to run a museum. You see, if you find a dinosaur skeleton, and a hind leg is missing on the dinosaur, because a river took the hind leg away 10,000 years ago. And you can't display that dinosaur for the kids with 3 legs. Because they come home and say, Mother, that dinosaur had only 3 legs. So you have to put the plastic legs, don't you? You have to put the plastic leg. But here you are hesitant of putting plastic legs into your data sets. But at the museum we can do that. And we don't pretend it's true data. We note that this is because this dinosaur came without 1 hind leg, so we added it. So we have an educational purpose with how we display the data. And then we can do it in different ways. That just shows how you can complement the way the World Bank is providing the data for multi-purpose use. where you can add data, you can do different things. And then we can show that this is the economic development of the world. Can you see how the world got richer and richer? The brown ones, which was West Europe and North America. This is North America, this is Canada. And they sort of got richer and richer. And then they started to get healthier with the new technology coming up. Whereas the rest of the world, after they got independent, they got healthy first. And then they started to get rich. And it's very interesting how I can push. This is about 80,000 numbers that go through your eyes in about 20 seconds. That's the bandwidth you have on animations. And it really gives another measure. Now, this doesn't replace research in any way whatsoever. This is hypothesis generating. This is communication of research. It is before and after the solid research which you do with SPSS or SAS or whatever statistical program you use. And we have intentionally not added any correlation lines or anything in this so that people would think that they were doing research when they are exploring data or communicating data. Now, how has the world changed then? How should we look at the world? Well, obviously, we have had the emerging economies which are there, and we have the poorest 2 billion, and we don't have any good name for it. And the big change has come, and you can even put the date to it. And being here in Washington, I have to honor the President of the United States, not the present one, the last one, George W. Bush. And this is very rare that Swedish public health professors honor George W. Bush. And I always do that in the later part of my lectures because people will remember it. Because it did one remarkable thing. I always admire politicians who do something which goes contrary to what they've been talking and thinking about in their entire life when they are faced with difficulties. On the 19th of November, 2008, President George W. Bush hosted the G20 meeting here in Washington. And that was really crucial. We are still getting the documentation behind that there was no way G7 could solve that financial crisis. And you see, they got so enthusiastic, so they even added 2 worlds behind there. There was such an eagerness of the administration to show that we want the whole world to be here. Some people even claim that this just represents the United States don't know the world map, so you can put a double one in there. Anyhow, it came out quite good, that meeting. It came out quite good. And how it had been followed up, it's quite amazing that crisis, forget why it was caused and who is to be blamed for that. But anyhow, it came out in a completely new world. And this is how we have to see the new world, the emerging markets. It's Mexico with 2 children there, Bangladesh with 2 children per woman, and it's Vietnam there with 2 children per woman. That happens before the growth of the economy. And then we have some countries down there like Afghanistan where there's 6 children on the motorbike and no mother at all. And that's a completely different place. So what will happen in the future then? What will happen in the future? Well, we have here used I have one other thing I would like to show. I will go to our website there. Here is the external depth, for instance. The external depth, and it's from World Development Indicators here. I hope now that we will get the depth for the countries. You have not added the high-income countries' depth. Please get that in now, because that's where the depth is today. We really need, World Development Index have been great, but there's still some indicators where you don't cover the whole world. Now, how do we do this when we display it? If you click there on the axis, you get here. This is how we think an institution like Gapminder Foundation should act. Just one click away from the one who provides the data. And we will help them driving traffic onto the website. If people really are interested in the data, they can leave the museum, they can go there. Or if you say, no, this was boring, I want to go back. So they go back here. It's all catching the different users. It's all catching the different users. And we also found in our website that we had two types of users. We had the lean forward users and the lean backward users. The lean forward users, they are the ones that more like geeks, and they're saying, oh, I want this trade balance here. This is trade balance. If they are above there, they are positive trade balance. Here they have negative. Look, United States 1984, they had a negative trade balance. What happened in the world? I want to see this. So the lean forward users run it forwards like this, you know. And you find, wow, how could this happen? How could one country be down here completely outside everything else with such a negative trade deficit, whereas China is flying up there? You know? Most users we have are not lean forward, they're lean backwards. They will only click once. They grab the cafe latte and they will click a play button on a YouTube video. That's why you have the big user groups. So that means that when you make your data available, it will be displayed by Gapminder Foundation in a bubble graph, and someone will use that bubble graph to make a video, and that will catch the users. So it's needed to be several user groups between, and this can evolve now with this great new policy that you have. Now, let me show the final thing, the final race which we have, where we have used the historical data with Madison on one hand and the projections from IMF on the other. I would like to run this game here with starting 1800. I'm back in the conventional graph. Time on this axis and income per person, GDP per capita, purchasing power, inflation adjusted on this axis. And we are starting 1800, and we have here on the line United Kingdom, richest in the world at that time. Distinctly lower income, United States, then China, then Japan, then little Sweden here. Sweden was poorer than China and Japan at that time. And down here, India, under European dominance. Way back in history, India and China and Europe was almost on the same level, and Asia even was before here. But that's backwards in history. Now, what happened here? And this, I think, is very important for the worldview we have. Because we had that idea of the rise of the West, and then the rise of the rest. But was that at all true? What happened here? If I go forward from 1800, slowly here, I grab this here, and we go forward here, 1800. You can see Sweden down there. It's not very funny, you know. And what did my relatives say at this point? No, we give up, they said. This is too bad. They sold the farm, they bought the ticket, and they now fill the streets of Minneapolis and Portland. It's very interesting to see that the mass time of immigration, it was not like going to an open, vast land, poor land. United States of America was distinctly richer than Sweden 1850. Whereas United Kingdom still was, of course, ruling the world, you know, and no one would ever catch up. It wasn't a discussion about the Western world, it was the British Empire at that time. But what happened then was, look at the United States there, catching up. Sweden is doing a little better, Japan is starting to follow. Japan is starting to, and here United States, even before the First World War, catched up with Britain. And look how close Sweden is to Japan. And India and China, tragically, just down there in poverty. Nothing happens. Centuries pass, nothing happens. And now they get independence, and they don't get the economic policy right until here Deng Xiaoping is coming. Now something is happening. And they go through the crisis there without any problem. Can you see the crisis? I had to have, there's no pointer here. This is Lehman Brothers. Can you see how small it is? There's nothing to make a fuss about. The crises are not, this is Second World War. That was a real thing. The more you look into the economy, you really start to respect and admire the United States for the enormous effort done by the whole country during the Second World War. How it changed the entire economy, you know, and the depth that, I've come to realize that, what that was, you know. But the most important is not these crises, you know. It's the growth you have in between. The problem for India here and China was negative growth for 150 years. Very bad to be colonially dominated. These two independent countries managed to do it. And look, Sweden is the Japan of Europe. A remote pine forest place, you know, where we maintained independence and learned from others. And we copied. And then eventually we did some good technology ourselves. It's very interesting to see that there was never a West rising first and then the East. And now China is coming like this. And exactly doing the same rate as Japan. Japan was the trailer. This is the film. Or there are two films coming actually, China and India. And I projected that they will cross this line exactly there because the growth is not so impressive any longer. I heard people were discussing in that big meeting in Seattle whether it was 1% or 2% or perhaps 3%, some optimists said. You know. This won't grow very fast up here. In Japan, they have a problem. Everyone, Europe is having still more problems. This is doing well. They will meet there, and I've cut it down here. And the point of unification of income per person between India, China, West Europe, and North America is 2048, the 27th of July. It is my 100th birthday. I had to adjust it a little to hit that day. But the important message there is that worldview is a narrative. It's a narrative that we got from our parents, from our teachers, from our employees, and from our culture. And to change that narrative with good data and good statistics takes more than numbers. But it can't be done without the good numbers. And this is what we see we can do it. And we can really represent a completely new way of looking at the world here. Because what will happen here is most probably that China and India will catch up. There's always this chance that it won't happen. Climate change is coming. There's no serious investment. But the best US company that was presented in that CEO summit was someone who made costly male underwear. And then there was some who had men fighting in cages. And then it was Twitter. Whereas the main Chinese companies were making solar energy panels, electrical cars, and batteries for the future. It's quite interesting to see what China is generating now when they go into the innovation phase. And we need to get this data. And I really like this. Open data is not enough. It must be the open knowledge, you know, and it must be open solution, the understanding of the new world. It's a great idea. A Wikipedia-like, solid Wikipedia-like basis. The World Bank's publication has also been great if it was the right topic, the right year which you were interested in. But if you were interested in that topic 7 years later, then there was no update on that analysis. So how would you follow that? How would you be able to have this data policy to be followed by what we need, a more analytical approach, a more advice-like approach for it? That's quite a challenge. It's so much which we can do on the internet. It's really, really much we can do. We are trying to do very, very few things and to make things understandable. What was there? Where were we? Yes, this is HIV in the world. HIV percent adults with HIV. This is dollar per person. And the size of the bubble is the number infected with HIV. And you can see Uganda turned around already in 1990. Zimbabwe went sky high. Thailand came here. South Africa started late, but very soon became the country with most HIV-infected persons in the world. And the main thing I would like to show with this graphic here, what a difference in sub-Saharan Africa. The dark blue is sub-Saharan Africa, and you find many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, many, 5, 10, 15, which are just like the rest of the world. And others are sky high. What was the main difficulty in doing this? Took 18 months to get the data set out of UNAIDS. Took 12 months after the director of UNAIDS in public and in email confirmed that we could get the data set. Very severe intensive care version of database hugging disorder. Because people who are working on data, that people are working with that know the sensitivity with governments about the data. It ain't easy. It ain't easy. One has to be respectful also for people compiling international data. But yet, when we got the data, we could give a completely different image of it. And the time series data which we have, why do we have time series data for HIV? Because all the basic surveys of HIV exist in one repository, freely available in the world. US Census Bureau. And I convey the official thanks from the people of the world for the great data policy of the United States. It's really serious. The United States has a very amazing data policy. Canada is the worst seller of data in the world. It seems that independence from the British Crown had the founding fathers deciding that the data should belong to the people. And it's quite stimulating to find. For us in Sweden, it was very strange to find that. We thought, oh, Canada would be more public, US would be more private. No, it's not. US has a very sound, clear division of what is public and what is market. So that's why we have it. And it's that data from the Census Bureau that UNAIDS use in very good modeling, highly professional, very good serious, hard-working people who have compiled the time series for HIV, but then they don't share them. Just hard copy for subcontinents and so on. They don't share them. And I think that's very unwise. That was very unwise. Because you can do it. And we have had no complaints whatsoever when we made a YouTube video of this and we had made this available. There's too much fear. I think statistics had the period when they wanted to avoid risk rather than to manage risk. And ending up, I have to say that this free data and free data access will lead to a lot of rubbish out there. A lot of mistakes will be done. People will come and claim things which are completely wrong. They would have turned data sets in between each others. They will have done the wrong interpretations. And they will use wrong statistics. And I call it freedom. It's exactly like with the press. People write a lot of rubbish. A lot of false statements, you know. But it corrects itself. It's free press. And there's only one way we can meet that, and that is recognize what is good statistical data and give resources to the data producing units to have a good web page. Because that web page corresponds to the watermark on the banknote. It can never ever be so that World Bank let others use their data but don't get resources to have their own web page. Because someone who would doubt that company in California or that professor in Sweden or that company in China who claim that they use World Bank data set, they must be able to go back to worldbank.org data and check, is this really correct or have they messed it up? I think this is the only way. The watermark must be there. So therefore, thank you very much for the policy. This is the time to invest in statistics, and this is the time when we will get a lot of benefit from statistics by other investments around the world. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Hans, for a most fascinating and stimulating discussion, and obviously very entertaining, and helping a lot of people look at data and statistics in new ways, and helping us understand how we can really better apply the vast wealth of data that we've now opened up to the world. So let's take some questions. I'm sure there are many. And please, if you could, just come to the microphones, and perhaps for our guests, if you could identify maybe just what you do in the bank, or at least your name, and give them a sense of who you are.
Hey, good morning. My name is Eric Gunderson from Development Seed. Quick question. Do you see the bank's open data push now different than some other government open data pushes? There's a lot of talk about a competition happening. Like, how do you see competitions playing into open data and those kind of incentives versus where the bank stands having key stakeholders that clearly need this data? And how do you start those outreach pushes to other NGOs that should be integrating with this data set. Is a competition a right model, or should there be other work to help some of these NGOs invest on the tech side to integrate into the main API?
Well, I like competition. I've lived in countries with central planning. And I've been neighbor to countries with central planning. It was not nice. Competition is good, but it already had to be, what I say, the watermark has to be there. The web page must be there at the organization who provide the data. And I think a major challenge is not the communities around the world and the international agencies, the relation between national statistical agency and international agencies. This, I think, has to be developed. Because many of the poorer countries, low-income countries, middle-income countries are doing better. But low-income countries, they get irritated when they have a number and they don't know the origin of that number and an estimate made for their country. Not so much that they say it's wrong, but they have no control. They have no experts in their country who can explain for the political leaders or for those concerned in the country why they estimate it. Remember many African leaders say we don't have this much HIV in our country. This doesn't fit with our experience. And the Indian president said the same. And they were right. There was a period when the estimates of HIV was wrong. And it got right. Why did it get right? US taxpayers, DHS, Demographic Health Survey, started to include HIV, and we got representative sample of HIV. And DHS cured 10 million people from HIV. It's better than PEPFAR, actually. So it's enormously that we got the right proportion. Where many African countries like Kenya and Ethiopia, it fell to half. And India actually never had that high level. So countries must be there, and there I think I was very happy this morning to hear about the collaboration between the World Bank and India to invest in data on subnational level, because this is very important. Sometimes, I mean, Rafael Lozano, who now works in Seattle but was in Mexico, he said that there's one day a year when you're interested to compare your country with the rest of the world. The other parts of the year, you just compare the different regions within your country with each other. You look what happens in your country, you look what's happened over time. So subnational data is extremely important. And the problem is that the skill of making surveys and representative two-stage cluster sample surveys of different kinds, to a certain extent has delayed countries with economic constraint from developing the right collection of registered data and get death certifications working. We made this beautiful shortcut, but I wouldn't go as far as to blame DHS, but there is a contradiction. Countries have to move on and get better registered data. And the MDG process is appalling in this aspect. It's just one big advocacy game. The MDG hasn't brought almost any serious money or resources into measurements. It's just a number of massage institutes that have created data series for which you can run advocacy. And they are useful because you can see the magnitude of problems with these modelings. You know. But you can't monitor what is happening in countries. And therefore, we need more serious data. It's interesting, why did World Fertility Study start in the United States? It was a strategic investment because it was perceived that fast economic growth would benefit the communist part of the world, that you would get more revolutions. It was sort of strategic investment of the United States. And then you get the serious investments. Why did Sweden start 1749 to register every birth and every death and promote breastfeeding like hell? Because 1709 and 1718 we lost first half the army and then the other half of the army in a terrible warlord, stupid imperialistic attempt by Sweden in the past. And then it was for the survival of the nation to produce more soldiers we invested in. And then we started to measure seriously. So that's interesting. When the country gets really serious about something, they really measure. Development aid sometimes is not serious. It's a little too much advocacy. And then it's enough with modeling. So I would like to have that that we must not let this free data and these fascinating animations and everything we can do replace the serious collection and measurements of data.
Let me just add a quick word to that. Last week I had the pleasure to speak at a gathering hosted by Google with 200 plus developers for the Transit Authority in New York. And the slogan of the evening became "Beat Boston." So what was the thing that motivated people was, can we be more transparent, put out more data, get more data out than Boston can? So I think the competition on the one hand is a very good driver, a race to the top, if you will. It's why we started data.gov with only 47 data sets. I mean, it's embarrassing 47 data sets given the wealth of information we sit on, but it got the ball rolling, the process started, and created a platform that now, as I've mentioned earlier, has been mimicked in many cases around the state, at the local level, at countries, with people, again, trying to engage in a race to the top. But I think that's only part of it, and your question really gets at this. There is the useful use of competition, again, both to get the data out there and also to drive the creation of new stuff, like new toys and apps and tools and visualizations using the data. And so we have prizes or T-shirts that you get when you create the best tool or the best visualization. And again, the use of competition can be very useful. But community is equally important in this case. So it's when, for example, you're trying to really tap the best expertise and knowledge to solve a social problem, we need lots of people working together using the data that's available then to try to address an issue. So, for example, the Housing and Urban Development has now decided it's going to invest its resources in homelessness prevention and putting out all the data it can find, not just at the federal level, but at the state level, at the local level, and is looking for partners who have in other NGOs data sets that can help to address the issue of homelessness prevention so that we can have the best informed policy. So what they're trying to do is to truly create a community or an ecosystem. Take, for example, what's gone on in San Francisco with the launch of the Open 311 project. There was a recognition that both San Francisco and New York have a 311, a customer service hotline, but that instead of trying to simply compete to develop the best one, let's create a community, in this case what they call the Gang of Seven, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Detroit, I'm forgetting a few others, all the major cities around New York, to now create an open API and then share and trade know-how so that everybody develops the best system. Because ultimately you don't want 1,000 different tools doing, well, I'm going to get in trouble as I say this. We want to have 1,000 flowers blooming on the one hand, but then we also want some convergence around useful tools, useful visualizations that help in the case of developing the best 311 platform. We need the competition between the cities, but we then also need the collaboration and the sharing and the community that's developed among developers to say, let's converge around not building 800 different versions of Is the Bus Coming on Time, when we may end up with a couple of different versions of Is the Bus Coming on Time tools that can derive from these open data initiatives. So I think, as the questions really suggested, I took it really as a comment and the right one at that it's a combination of both the competition, the race to the top for openness, and then the collaborative ecosystem, the participation, the collaboration that we create when we are open about the data.
Thanks very much for that, and obviously things we'll need to keep in mind as we are going to announce soon an Apps for Development Challenge to stimulate and increase developer interest in the data that we've unleashed. Next question, please.
My name is Valerie Hofbauer. I'm with the Multilingual Web team. When we decided to launch open data, we actually decided to do it in French, Spanish, and Arabic, not just focusing on English-speaking audiences. And I'd like to get your feedback on that. And then I'd like to get a sense of what's the open data movement outside of English-speaking countries, and what do you think is the future for the entire world to collaborate on this?
Yes. So first, let me just say that the emphasis from the U.S. perspective, our goal with data.gov was to start as much as possible with the wholesale data strategy, to put everything out as we had it, in whatever form we have it, as quickly as possible, rather than waiting to do things like create the visualizations, to let the musicians create the visualizations and to be the composers, if you will. So in some cases, if we're talking about documents that we're sitting on that are in English, that should also exist in other languages and should be translated, we're now looking at issues both of translation, but also of translation not just from English into foreign languages, but from legalese and government speak into English, as is the case with many of our documents. So I think that, again, we shouldn't let the retail presentation get in the way of the aggressive push towards wholesale release of data in the first place. But that means we have the importance of people, whether it's on the governmental side or on the NGO side, who are then turning around and creating multilingual presentations of data and information. It's extraordinarily important to, again, build up a robust global community of people who can interact with and use this data. If we talk about, global indicators, we can't talk about, if we talk about national indicators, we can't talk about them only domestically. We have to talk about them in a global context, global health, global education, etc. I have in my inbox now, and one of the things that's inspiring to me is that I have invitations from Malaysia, from China, from Doha, from Qatar, this week, in fact. We were in Mexico last week, from several Latin American countries. If I go just by the number of invitations that our office gets to come and interact with people who want to talk about openness, I think that there is a movement that exists out there, and by no means is the U.S. We might be getting a lot of media and airtime from the fancy weathermen, but I don't think that we're necessarily at the forefront of what is really a global movement and conversation, and we're just going to get better at solving these problems. To your point about the G20, if we want to talk about how to address whether it's improving the quality of patents or the oil spill or global health issues, we can't do this in a national conversation. It has to be in a global conversation. So we need to do whatever we can to push this movement. And the last thing I just want to say about this is that that's why we sometimes have different ways of talking about this issue. In the U.S. context, an argument about democracy and the First Amendment and government accountability and anti-corruption, which resonates very well in this culture, is not always the way that we talk about how and why we do this work, which is economic development. All of the reasons that you talk about and that you focused on here are potentially more useful and equally valid to the why we have an open government movement. And in fact, in this economic climate, even in the U.S., where we need to get that debt data, and because that Chinese bubble is going past us quickly, we talk about open government not just from the perspective of the good government First Amendment arguments, but we talk about it as a way that we create jobs. It's why we were absolutely explicit when we put this data out to not create those limitations of non-commercial use, but to say we're delighted when the Patent Office puts out all of its data, puts out the entire corpus of Patent Office database, it's explicitly so that people will build patent-based businesses on top of it, information businesses on top of it, information visualization businesses, because that competition in the marketplace will help to drive our better understanding and create jobs and create value just in the information sector and information industries themselves. So again, we think that there's a tremendous development opportunity deriving from the open data movement, which I think should help to spur the release of data in countries where there is no First Amendment and government anti-corruption or accountability arguments may not win the day.
Hans, would you like to add to that?
I think it will be a very messy period now, because
I just pressed that. Yeah, there you go.
I think we will have a messy period, There's a competition of finding out where the interface will be. The Dallas project by the Microsoft is very interesting, and the idea is that they provide storage places for data where they will create the interactivity. It means that an organization like the World Bank would put their data into the Microsoft storage place. And why do we all upload PDF files? Because Acrobat Reader was free. And that was a very clever business solution. And it's those ones who find out the right way of doing that, And I think when TV will start to use statistics in one way, then everyone will come and put their data in the way so it will appear there. As long as Larry King Live has those boring static bubbles behind him, then we have a great thing to do, until things start to move there. And we have what is SDMX? SDMX is an attempt by the statistic community from their purpose to unify data. Let's see if that will be the one who succeed, or it will be a commercial provider of a technology that will succeed. So the only thing I think is very important is not to outsource and privatize the collection of data. But that, I think, that there is ideas from the far right wing in Sweden that you should outsource that. You are doing it in certain ways in the United States. So, but the point of having public statistics and public data, I think everyone wants the national banks, even Greeks, these days. So we need to have the national institutions and then let the innovation. But how the interface will look like, I don't know. And I think it's good to allow a messy period and to call all those terrible mistakes freedom. Because otherwise, things won't happen.
Okay, why don't we take the final two questions together and ask you to respond to them collectively if we could, please.
Hi. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. João Pedro Azevedo from the Poverty and Gender Unit in LAC. My question really is on how we draw the line I mean, we've been discussing about data here, but I think actually a lot of times we're actually discussing about indicators. And from data to indicators, there's a big jump. And we talk about open data, right? But a lot of times the indicators that we're using, first of all, the way they were constructed are not very transparent, right? So I think it brings me to the issue of which has to do with the open knowledge agenda on how to make the actual programs that were used to generate these indicators available as well. And also there's the issue of the microdata that was originally used to generate these indicators, which are also in several countries not publicly available as well. And should we treat a data point that we can backtrack the actual source, the microdata, in the same way, and we know the indicator that was used, the program that was used to construct this indicator, in the same way there's a data point that we don't know, that we don't have this information. And also you mentioned surveys, sample surveys, right? So there's the issue of inference on these things, right? It's wonderful to start creating these data visualization platforms that make accessibility a lot easier, but how do you combine the information that many of these data points actually have a measurement error associated with that, and we actually know what it is, right? So actually those are two questions. I mean, how to incorporate the standard errors of these measures on the data visualization, if you guys have any thoughts about it. And the second one, and the first question is actually more on the issue of transparency of the whole process, of the whole production chain of these indicators, right? From the microdata to the programs, so on and so forth. Thank you.
Okay, let's take the final question as well, and then we'll have answers.
Hi, my question is directly related to what Dr. Rosling said, and it's probably directed to him. Is it possible for me to use my own data sets and change the accesses and sort of use the visualization tool? It comes more as a consumer of data and such tools to make effective analysis. So that's simply the question.
Okay, I'll turn it over.
Starting with the last one, Google has made Motion Chart available free, and they now have Public Data Explorer together with data sets from the World Bank, and they are working on it. And there are 6 other companies who have copycatted the moving bubbles, which is very successful, including you. And you have spurred the Russian IT industry by that. So, but this is good. This is good. It's not bad because it's legal. Also, you don't own the graphic interface. You have to say you own the source code. You don't own the graphic interface. So you have to realize that. So on data it is available. The great problem, we also, Gapminder Foundation, make our version of Trendalizer, the software we have made that, offered that freely available for those who want to share data. But it has not been a success. The difficult thing is to take the data to convert a data set into an understandable format in moving bubbles, that is the difficult thing. And to from there automatically generate a storytelling tool, no one has managed to do that. And let's face it, I was just with Microsoft yesterday, and Bill Gates was very honest some years ago when he asked me why we didn't sell to them, and because he wanted it in Excel, and they are still working on it. 2.5 years later, soon we will get the moving bubbles in Excel and other graphic. But I can't make bar charts in Excel. They never come out of them. It's so difficult. It's so difficult because I use Excel. It's a great software because it's standardized, you know, and I can see the graphics, but it's so difficult to foresee how I should order which columns and rows should appear what in which graphics. And to invent that interface, that's the difficult thing. No one, that's up for invention to do. So this is for the software companies to compete. The first question was a major one, data auditory pathways. We will have a number of workshops, brainstorm meetings, big conferences on that over the coming 30 years. Because it's really, and let me just pinpoint one of the most important indicators we have, child mortality. It was really good when Chris Murray got resources at EMA and he started the competing compilation of data for child mortality, because then United Nations stepped up and made a much more transparent compilation of child mortality. And we have Gapmind have sort of chosen, first we took the EMA, the Seattle version, because it was better documented. But then we went back to the UN version because that was better documented. Huh? But we not because we like UN and we like the sort of competition there. And the maternal mortality data now is at enormous discussion, because the world is asking for maternal mortality data, but no one is measuring it. So you get huge attempt in massage modeling, you know, to produce these data sets. And then we don't have the primary data sets are not available in all countries for it. And you can have one primary survey of maternal mortality in Peru, which is compiled by 2 different persons, which yields 2 different estimates for 1 year. And then you can take those estimates together with other estimates and model a time series in different ways. So actually transparency is what we have. But what we see happening with the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation is that they give their data sets away to a commercial Dutch company as soon as they've worked on it. It's called Elsevier and they publish Lancet, but it's a commercial company. And they don't have a good Creative Commons license on that data set. So it's quite interesting, but we see now that scientific journals come with an appendix with data, and that's something I think will happen in the scientific community, that when you publish something, you should publish the data set. However, statistics, social statistics, environmental statistics, economic statistics is difficult. There are 2 areas which have succeeded beyond all expectation. It's astronomy. Astronomy shared their data since 40 years back. Amateur astronomers to find a comet, to NASA's great works, you know. Because it's just one grid up there. That's one simple grid up there. Basically longitude and latitude, and you can put every star, planet, and comet that you see. So you have a common unified identifier for each observation. The other great success is the gene bank. The sharing of genes in the world. There have been a long period, almost every second Nobel Prize laureate in medicine have attributed their prize to the public sharing of genetic information. Say, oh, we were studying a worm, you know, and why the worm developed certain organs and not other organs. And then we uploaded the gene, and we found out that 2 cancer research groups had found that that was the gene when it was deficient that caused cancer. And that was the great breakthrough. And why is that? There's 4 letters in one sequence. It's stupidly simple information. 4 letters in one sequence, like a million of identification points. So they have this unifier. Whereas the World Bank's data, a study on small-scale enterprises in northern Bolivia, you know. How could you upload that together with a study of private and public hospitals in 4 countries in Latin America and publish that with environmental data from rivers in Latin America? There's no simple unifier. That's why you need the statistical profession. That's why it's so desperately needed, you know, that compiles and make it comparable in the West Bay Post. United States is very funny because you subdivide the country. States is very clear. It's Nebraska or it's Oklahoma. It's very clear. But below the states, it's a funny division of voting districts and school districts and counties, and you don't have a unified division system of the country, which maybe has its explanation and its benefits, you know, but it's not good for statistics. It's problematic, you know. Sweden is much more disciplinized. It cut on that. And OECD has done a great job of making this data available. Let me just show you finally the force when you get subnational data here. If I go to this one, this is income per person versus life expectancy. Now I have to make full screen. It's very important to make full screen always. Yeah, you see, this is nice. And these are the provinces of China: Sichuan, Anhui, Shanxi, Beijing, Shanghai, 1958. And this you can see. And the blue ones is the countries of the world. The green one is Taiwan. Always difficult to be politically correct how you put it. We made it green, you know. So can you see how the Chinese provinces are moving there? With Mao Zedong and then with Deng Xiaoping, they start to get richer. But you have the difference between them. But it's still better to be a poor Chinese province than a poor neighboring country. And this is very interesting when you can break it down, you know. United States is not interesting to break down in states. The states are surprisingly similar. Here the differences are on local level, local community level, you see the difference. But this is very important. You can do it like this. And let me finally show, you know, the strength of what you really can do with data. This Windows 7 is problematic. Oh, we're there, yes. Yes, if I go, you see, how successful can you be with statistics? Many people say, statistics won't make it, you know. It's not so interesting. People just go for rude things. They go for sex, isn't it? Huh? They want money. Huh? They want health. Huh? So what do you get if you search for sex, money, and health on Google? You get 80 million hits, and I'm on top. 62 years old Swedish public health professor. And I'm very proud of this one, you know. When here gay couples face bigger health insurance coverage bill, you get down there, you know. There's a baby boom health and money, sex, fame, and health and yoga, you know. But yeah, so it really you can make it there, but to make it from that funny top all the way down to the serious question about data auditor, it's quite a complex sector we are up for, statistics and data. And there's a lot of things we can do for it, but it has to be good all the way from the fame on the YouTube up there to the serious collections of the data. And I think this is just one step. It's not one simple solution. In fact, you will be facing a lot of challenges in the coming year with this new open access policy. But you'll also see the interest you have generated. It's enormous out there, and this will grow over the number of years. And that's why we'll get rubbish mixed with all these valuable results.
And Beth, your final thoughts?
Yeah.
Very quickly, final thoughts. I'm glad you started with NASA, because NASA has now invested $5 million in creating a new office of participatory space exploration, with the idea being that, again, the citizen data that can be generated, this messy data, what we can get from the amateur astronomers, as much as what we get from the NASA professionals, is as important, because ultimately what this is about is spurring action and spurring engagement. And so the last thought that I sort of want to leave you with is, I think you've well covered the problem of, we can spur the engagement of, there are the geeks out there, the true statistics geeks, who want to pour through other people's data sets and find mistakes. And when you find those mistakes, tell us through data.gov. We have a way to do that. We're appealing to that geek differently from the geek who's going to build the video game, from the geek who's going to actually use the statistic to make a policy. But there's, again, a range of geekery that we want to appeal to. But ultimately, this is really about taking action informed by data, informed by empirics. And I think that if we think about how we also visualize and use some of these tools, not only to show the raw numbers, but to show us back to ourselves, the actions that we can take through the screen, the communities that we create around data, all of the psychological research shows that, and this is another 30 years of conferences worth, that it has a powerful effect when we can see ourselves through the screen, not just the numbers, not just the facts, but also the social relationships visualized back to us, so that we can come up with new ways of taking action, whether it's pouring through data sets or making video games or writing policy. Ultimately, what all of this is about is taking action so that we can change our world for the better. How's that for a close?
Thank you so much. Thank you both, Hans and Beth, for sharing your ideas and thoughts on the open agenda and open development and moving forward. Thanks again, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon.